China has been changing. In just 40 years, they went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being on track to overtaking the size of the United States economy. But as the country has gotten rich, a strange phenomenon has started to occur, one which could quietly unravel its progress. Nobody is spending any money. In America, the average citizen spends nearly all of their income, saving just 5% last year. In China, saving is now 8 times higher, at over 40%. That might not sound like such a problem, but people aren't saving because they want to. They're saving because they don't have a choice. And now it looks like China might be paying the price. After the collapse of real estate giant Evergrande in 2021, the government has tried to transform China into a modern, consumption-based economy, but so far they have totally failed. Despite having 3 times the population, China consumes just half as much as the EU. That means that spending that supports businesses, raises taxes, and creates jobs just isn't happening. The very factor that was once behind the Chinese miracle is now quietly killing their economy. So what's actually going on with the Chinese economy? And is there anything that can be done to turn it around? Here's the story of how the Chinese economic miracle is quietly turning into a nightmare. This issue didn't come out of nowhere. To understand why China is stuck in a spending crisis, you have to understand what the country was built to do in the first place. That's because China's economy wasn't designed for comfort, consumption, or lifestyle. It was designed to catch up. In the 1980s, China was emerging from decades of isolation, famine, and political chaos under the Mao regime. Its GDP per capita was less than $200. Even adjusted for inflation, it would make China one of the poorest countries in the world. So when Deng Xiaoping opened the doors to market reforms in 1978, he wasn't trying to create a modern, consumer-based economy. He was trying to keep China from collapsing. Unlike other countries, China simply didn't have the luxury of dreaming about shopping malls and consumer goods. Everything had to go towards transforming the economy into an industrial powerhouse. That meant pouring resources into building factories, investing in infrastructure, and crucially, saving money for the future. While Americans were buying TVs, microwaves, and second cars, Chinese families were saving every penny they could. In the early 2000s, the average Chinese family was saving over half of their income. The average American was only saving around 5%. And here's the thing, when a household saves, that money doesn't just sit in the banks. It flows through the financial systems into loans for factories, investment into infrastructure, and mortgages for houses. Thanks to the huge pool of savings, China was able to invest trillions into their economy. By 2010, investment into physical assets accounted for nearly half of total GDP growth. And for a while, it worked. In just 30 years, China saw over 800 million people lifted out of poverty. That's almost 15% of the world's population. Its cities exploded, villages became factory towns, and factory towns became megacities. And as concrete poured and ports expanded, China became the world's largest exporter, the top steel maker, and the backbone of global supply chains. One industry more than any other fueled this growth: construction. Let's face it, AI is everywhere, and there's so many AI tools out there that it becomes so expensive to buy them all. But now you don't have to. You can use today's sponsor, ChatLLM by Abacus AI, an all-in-one powerful platform where all top AI models come together in one place. You can get access to ChatGPT o3 Pro, GPT 4.1, Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude Sonnet 4, DeepSeek, Grok 4, and many more. There's no confusion because Root LLM automatically picks the best model based on your prompt. And it's not just text prompts, you can also generate images and videos with so many different models, all inside one platform. Their Humanize feature also makes your content sound more human and bypass AI detectors. And with simple prompts, you can generate docs, PowerPoints with deep research. They also have a VS Code-based code editor called Code LLM that also comes included. And to top it off, they have Deep Agent, a powerful general agent that can build websites, apps, AI agents, chatbots, and complete research reports. Here's the kicker, all of this for just $10 a month, a way more affordable way than paying for each AI tool individually. Visit chatllm.abacus.ai or click the link in the description to try it now. By 2010, construction made up nearly half of Chinese GDP growth. All the while, the housing market was booming, with prices rising by over 15% every year. The average Chinese citizen didn't have to spend more. As long as the construction industry kept going, there was enough money following around the economy to keep it moving. When developers borrowed money to build, it stimulated banks. When they bought land, it funded local governments. And when construction started, it created jobs and demand for materials. So even with weak household spending, the constant building cycle kept money circulating across the economy. Nobody really stopped to think what would happen if the market crashed. But then it did. It began in 2021 with the collapse of Evergrande, one of the titans of Chinese real estate. For years, this company had symbolized China's boom, owning everything from luxury towers to football clubs. But beneath the surface was over $300 billion in debt, and when it defaulted, the fallout was immediate. Tens of thousands of families were left with unfinished apartments. Projects froze mid-construction, and for the first time in decades, property prices began to fall. The one asset the middle class believed was untouchable, their home, had become a liability. And here's the thing, during a crisis, spending becomes the lifeline of an economy. When businesses collapse and investment dries up, it's consumer demand, everyday people buying goods and services, that keeps the money circulating. The government rushed to revive spending. They cut interest rates, offered tax breaks, and pushed banks to lend. But none of it worked. No matter how hard the government tried, people just wouldn't spend. So China found itself stuck. The very thing that had once fueled its growth now trapped the economy in economic malaise. Now, you might be thinking, the CCP is probably the strongest government in the world. There's surely something they could do to get people spending again. Well, at least for now, all of their efforts have totally failed. Household savings in China hit a record high of over $20 trillion, which is more than the entire GDP of the European Union. And almost 5 years on from the crisis, the country still hasn't really recovered. Growth rates are now at their lowest levels since the 1980s. But the real reason for this might not be what you expect. It all comes down to a strange feature of Chinese society, one which might be quietly killing the economy: collapsing birth rates. By 2040, more than 25% of China's population will be over 60. That's hundreds of millions of elderly citizens, with a shrinking working age population to support them. And here's the thing, older populations tend to save more and spend less. And China's demographic time bomb is already altering behaviour. Younger families are saving to care for aging parents, while elderly citizens are holding onto their cash to fund retirement and healthcare. All that means less money going into the economic machine. But the real problem isn't just the number of elderly, it's the lack of support behind them. A rapidly aging population might still spend if they had confidence in the system that backed it all up. But in China, that confidence simply doesn't exist. That might sound strange considering the country claims to be socialist, but in reality, the country's welfare state is extremely weak. Health insurance is limited, public pensions are modest, and even if a household has some disposable income, there's little structural support to spend it with confidence. Of course, all of this means more and more pressure is put on the country's young people. Rather than just worrying about themselves, their money needs to go to supporting their parents and even grandparents, and many are simply deciding that this burden is too big to bear. Instead, a new coping mechanism has emerged: lying flat. Young people are opting out of high-pressure jobs altogether. They aren't joining the economy, they're stepping back from it. Youth unemployment in China quietly surged past 21% before the government stopped publishing data altogether in 2023. That's 1 in 5 young people with no job, no income, and no clear path forward. Picture a graduate in Chengdu, saddled with debt, job offers that don't cover rent, and an expectation to provide for their entire family. For a generation that was promised prosperity, this feels like a broken contract, and many are simply opting out of the system. And here's where it gets dangerous. All of this feeds into a vicious cycle. Experts are estimating that long-term household consumption growth is likely to slow to around 3 to 4% per year in real terms over the next 5 to 10 years. At most, it will contribute around 1.5% of GDP growth per year, which is simply not enough to power a modern economy. Without this consumption, companies stop investing, and when companies stop investing, they stop hiring. When hiring freezes, unemployment rises, and when that happens, even more people stop spending. This is what economists call a deflationary spiral, when prices across the economy begin to fall. While this might sound like a good thing, it signals something deeper. Demand is weakening. Consumers aren't holding back because they're content, they're holding back because they're uncertain. The longer this cycle continues, the harder it is to reverse. People postpone purchases, Firms delay expansion. Confidence erodes, not because of one big shock, but from a steady drip of pessimism. And that's what makes deflation so dangerous. It doesn't explode, it sinks. Normally, this is where fiscal policy would come in. Governments tend to gap the spending with their own projects, investing in infrastructure, creating jobs, handing out stimulus checks, all just to keep the economy running. But here's the thing, China doesn't really have that option. After years of overbuilding, overborrowing, and bailing out, the government is already running out of fiscal headroom. The official budget deficit hit a record high in 2023, over 4% of GDP, the largest since the 1990s. And that's just what's on the books. China's local governments are also deeply indebted, much of it tied to land sales that are now drying up because nobody wants to build. In 2024, the CCP was forced to raise the ceiling on local government debt by 6 trillion yuan, or $600 billion, to cover the increased pressure. When local governments run out of money, the impact is immediate. It means less funding for public services, less investment, and less capacity to provide welfare, the very things that might restore enough confidence for people to start spending again. China isn't just another economy, it's the second largest in the world, and everybody relies on what China makes. Nearly 30% of global manufacturing happens there. It's the largest buyer of raw materials like iron, copper, and coal, and the biggest exporter of electronics, machinery, and everyday goods. And when a machine that big starts to seize up, the rest of the system starts to feel it. Already, global supply chains have been hit. Fewer factories running in China means fewer parts for manufacturers in Germany, Mexico, or Vietnam. And even the most advanced sectors aren't immune. China controls nearly 70% of global rare earth metal exports, materials that are essential for everything from electric vehicles and semiconductors to military equipment. If output slows, or even just becomes more unpredictable, it won't just raise prices, it could choke the very technologies that the rest of the world is trying to build its future on. In a globalized economy, China's internal freeze threatens to become everyone's problem. Today, China sits at a crossroads. For decades now, their economy has been an engine for prosperity. It lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, turned farmland into factories, and became the factory of the world. But that same model, built on investment, savings, and construction, is now cracking under its own weight. People aren't spending, companies aren't hiring, and young people are quietly opting out. At its core, this isn't just an economic problem. It's a question of trust. Trust in jobs, in the welfare system, in the future. And right now, that trust has broken. The Chinese government faces a choice. Rebuild confidence by creating real social safety nets, letting go of tight economic control, and shifting power toward households, or continue propping up a system that looks strong on the outside but is slowly sinking from within. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. An economy as big as China's doesn't need to crash to cause a crisis, it just needs to stop growing. And that's exactly what's starting to happen.